Hello everyone, I welcome you to the learning of distributed file system, part of distributed operating system. So at the start of this chapter, you know very well the concept related to file. You may have learned in your earlier studies also that file is a contiguous logical address space and which can be having different types based on the kind of extension that particular file has. Basically, the file is likely to be analyzed, understood in the form of nature, whether what type of data has been encoded in that particular file. So, based on the data, as one of the file is holding, the file will be having data in the form of numeric, maybe having a, you can say data in the form of characters, will be having a data in the form of binary, and basically as a programming language where we will be having a source code where the set of instructions can be grouped together so as to perform any specific task. So we can say that the program is basically having a set of instructions encoded for the case of having a specific task execution can be defined as a type of file over there. So a sort of contiguous logical address space where it is likely to get stored on the secondary storage device, we call the kind of set of instructions grouped together and will be given with some specific label. We say that it is a type of file. Then what type of system structure that we will be likely to have where the file is likely to be encoded over there. So file structure is basically having two basic components. One is logical storage unit and it is intended to have collection of related information. So you see data is where we will be having data in the form of unprocessed, you can say data as a way of having disconnected facts together. We'll be likely to plan some sorts of analysis and the way of will be likely to look for some information. That information is nothing but we'll be having some meaningful data in the form to be stored, or rather will be giving a sort of label which can be stored on the secondary storage device. So file structure basically having some logical storage unit, related organization, and meaningful data will be likely to make as a sort of set of instructions grouped together. So that will constitute as a file structure. So as I informed you that file system resides on secondary storage, just like we have the secondary storage device onto which we will be storing the related information and by which it can be accessed where there is a power failure or we reboot the computer system, the file system organization will be there itself residing in the permanent storage. Just like we have process control block where the PCB as a task control block gives a manifestation of process to the operating system. In similar manner, we'll be having a file control block where storage structure consisting of information about any type of file will be given wherever the user requirements are there or by which the user is accessing that particular kind of file. Based on the introduction to the file system, you may have already studied and also known about the file operations. So we define file as an abstract data type which is being implemented by the operating system. So by which we can perform a typical type of operation or will be having a regular mode of operation where the file system is to be accessed. So we can create the file, we can write data into the file, we can read data from the file, we can search data from the file itself by setting some seek program or basically having access to the concerned information where the bulky files are to be considered. We perform a delete operation by the time the particular file that is being created and that is being deleted where it is no longer to be used by the user. We can make truncate, just like the edit operation we can perform manipulation of the existing information can be done over there, either adding some of the information or rather to make some of the information to be deleted from that particular type of file. Followed with this particular operations, we will be having two general mode of operation. one is opening a file, another one is closing a file. So searching a directory structure on the type of file where the file is likely to be moved from the disk and it can be moved to the content entry into the memory. So you just see opening means we'll be having a sort of file that can be you can say moved from the secondary storage device into a memory. We say that it is a open operation. Close operation is where the particular file is being sent from memory back to the secondary storage device. It is just like swap in and swap out process, which we may have studied in the part of having demand paging, where what is being demanded or referenced by the current you can say programming execution, which will be brought in by the process of swapping, and that is nothing but open operation. And wherever the related file is of no use or related data will not be referred for longer stretch of time, it can be sent from memory back to the secondary storage device. So you see that swap out process, and we call that particular process and close over there. What the constitute as a component of typical file control block will have. So typical file control block will have file permission, will look for file dates, the type of file which has been created, what type of accesses as in read write execute, which will be given to the type of users, whether the type of file is the access in the group, who is the file owner, what are the policies for the case of group members. And ASL is basically access control list, which can be managed in general way, that which user is allowed to do what type of operations, whether he is owner, whether he is a group owner, or whether he is everyone else as a guest user. Along with this, the file size specifications are also there. What is the basic you can say file data has organized in what type of how many bytes are required, so as to look for as a storage strategy for the case of access of that particular file is also being mentioned in that particular file control block. Then you just see the type of file data blocks or pointers to file data blocks, just like the whether the file is a local file, whether the particular file is to be accessed in the remote environment. So based on that, the related pointers are being you can say stored for the case of access of that particular file, related to look for linkage of that particular file into the secondary storage device, whether it is a stateful workstation or whether it is a stateless workstation. So you just see, just like we will be having process control block where manifestation of process will be given you can say by the particular process control block to the operating system. In a similar manner, related all the type of information, detailed information from the type of file creation to the file termination, all these things will be stored in the sort of block we call it as a file control block. So file control block is a manifestation of file to the operating system. So in detailed information, either the file is local file, whether it will be accessed in the remote environment, all the detailed information for the case of having access mechanism of that particular file will be stored and maintained in that particular file control block. Then if we are trying to design a file service interface, just like if the file is to be accessed for the case of services, it is intended to provide for the case of having different group of users in consideration. So it points for 4-5 basic properties we say as a way of having the type of file and the type of access it is going to provide to its user. So it can be based on the type of attribute that particular file has, whether the related file should be immutable file or no, what is the capability list, the type of user as of now the concern for the case of having access to that particular file, the type of list that will be maintaining as an access control list, whether which type of user is allowed to perform what type of access, it will be given in the form of having access control list. And it is being supported by having file service model. So file service model comes in two forms. One it is either upload download model, another one it is either a remote access model. So what is basically attribute? Just like you know very well, the attribute is nothing but the characteristics of that particular file, or wherever as a user, if you are trying to look for the type of properties as an of clicking that particular file by having a right click of the mouse, you can check for properties as the last option in that particular drop down, and and you will be able to see different kinds of, you can say, information of that particular file, whether what type of suitable browser is there, what is the size of file, when the file is being created, who is owner, what is the security policy for that particular file. So the piece of information about that particular file is nothing but the file attributes. So it will be likely to get attached to that particular file, where the user is likely to create that particular file and trying to make it access either in the local environment, either in the global environment. So based on that, the properties as an attribute of that particular file may vary with respect to the kind of utility that the file is likely to provide to its user. The second design, you can say, property as an aspect we have is immutable. So by the name itself, it is very clear that mutability will not be over there. Just like once the file has been created, it will not be likely to make any sort of changes to that particular file. So you can create once a particular file and you can read at many. So write once, read many, as an worm, we call it as an worm, WORM. Write once, read many. So the file will be once created, it will not be likely to make changes in the further aspect as an of the utility of the file is being considered. Such a type of design specification, by the time the user is trying to create some file, and he will be likely to make that particular file only to be provided for the case of having read access, or only as an execute access by the different types of user. Such a type of file can be characterized as an immutable file, where file will be once created, it cannot be changed with the type of data it is holding over there, or the type of access that particular file is providing over there. Such a type of files will be used where we'll be having a file caching and file replication. Just like if the file you want to cache, and if there are no further updates, modification, write operation related to the particular file, so it will avoid the problem of having file with respect to caching, the cache consistency, or either if you are trying to make replication, there will be no, you can say, problem of having updating or just like replacing the particular file that has been circulated in group servers that will be accessed by different types of user. So consistency issue will not be over there if those sorts of file, if you want to characterize as a file for the case of having a problem for the case of cache consistency or replication related policies. So that time immutable files are likely to be preferred by the programmers. Comes the next design aspect as in capability. So capability is a kind of access permitted with respect to having different groups of user, whether the type of user is allowed to perform read, or whether he is allowed to perform write, or whether he is not allowed to perform read or write. So the related capability is the kind of ticket that will be held by a type of user, and based on the type of credentials, logging, you can say permissions, or the sorts of access mechanism that will be considered for the case of having access of that particular file. Based on that, the ticket is nothing but the capability that the user has been defined and provided with, so as to have an access of the resources in the computing system. Next one is access control list. So you see there will be a list of users in a system where the multi-user multitasking type of operating systems are there, or basically a group of users are being involved for the case of having access of the information. So that time such access control list will be maintained by the admin, where he will be carrying a list of users that are there in the group, the type of files, whether it is directory or whether it is a file, and will be having a sort of representation who is allowed to perform read, who is allowed to perform write, and who is allowed to perform execute. So based on this RWX access mechanism, the related admin or one who is a file server basically will analyze that particular access control list, and based on that the access to that particular file system will be provided. The last mechanism is there for the case of having design aspect is a file service model, which is upload download model and remote access model. So we'll see with the help of diagrams for the case of having upload download model, or basically the type of aspect as a design it will be likely to be considered over there. So you see it is a three you can say step algorithm where we'll be having a server where it is allowed to perform some sorts of, or rather it is expected to provide some file services to different types of users, and client will be over there who will be requesting a type of services from that particular file server so as to gain the file, perform the operations, and again return that particular file. So upload download model comes with the prerequisite that will be having a stateful, you can say, workstation model where client will be having its local, you can say, storage structure. He will be having its local memory. He will be having its secondary storage devices installed on his local space. So he will be requesting a file to the file service. So file server will provide that particular file to the client. Client will modify that particular file onto the local space. After modification, it will resubmit the same file to the server. So old file will be replaced by the new file that has been modified by the type of user in the close communication. So you see, step number one is that the file has been demanded by the client and the server is likely to send that particular file to the client. Second step, where accesses as an of having the read or write operations will be performed by that particular client. After having that modification or basically having the related user operations, he will be sending that particular file. When client is done, the file will be returned to the server. So you see, when the file comes back, so it will be compared with the timestamp with respect to having old and new file, and new file will be likely to make I can say accepted as the fresh file, and the older file will be replaced by the new file over there. So it is as an aspect of having design for the case of file services intended to have a close communication between the client and server. Second model is remote access model, where we say that the client is there and server is there. So it is coming with the sorts of specification where the group of users are there, and there is no such a local storage structure for the case of the clients are being considered. We say that it is stateless workstation, means there is no such a, you can say, policy for the case of client. They will be only provided with the terminals, and whatever they want to access, that will be accessed in the remote way. So nothing will be there downloaded, or rather it will be borrowed by the particular client. The client has to log in onto the server in a remote way, and he has to perform the write operations over there, related file operations over there, and after that he has to close this session. So for the particular time, the file will be accessed by a type of user likely to preserve the mechanism of having mutual exclusion, and he will be likely to enter into the critical section region. He will be accessing a sort of file, and after accessing, he will be likely to close the session, and after that he will be likely to make that particular file accessible to the other user. So file in a way will not be borrowed by the user onto the local space, as there is no as such a local space provided to the client. The clients are as an of having the stateless workstation. There is no secondary storage device as an of the mechanism for the case of having file downloading and modification. The client has to make the access with respect to the remote file that is being located onto the file server, and after access, the particular file as a session will be maintained by that particular server, and client will be likely to get out of the login sessions. So file always stay onto the server. Those are the users who wants to access has to request that particular file as a server where the remote access facility will be provided, and the related file will be accessed by the different kinds of user. So as I'm comparing download upload model and remote access model, by the name itself it is very clear. Download upload model is where the file will be downloaded by the user, and after access or performing the file operations, the file will be again uploaded onto the servers. So in upload download model, the clients and server mechanisms works in a form of having stateful workstation, means client will be having the facility to download. It is having secondary storage devices, it will be having its local memory, and after modification he will be allowed to perform the upload operations. But comparing with respect to the remote access model, by the name itself it is very clear that the file will be accessed in remote way. Just like you can see that the stateless workstations are there is no local memory, there is no secondary storage devices provided to the client. The client has to demand or will likely to look for some remote login sessions onto the server space itself, modify that particular file, perform the file operations, and then just log off for the case of having access to that particular file. So file always stays there onto the server. So you just see in this way the particular design for the case of having file service interface can be understood, where we'll be having the policy for the case of file attribute immutability. You can see as an of having the lit specification for the case of having capability as a ticket provided to the user, or access control list that will be maintained by the group owner, or having file service model in consideration. So you just see the particular attributes where you will find all these things when you right click that particular file with respect to the property option. So name, identifier, type, location, size, protection, date and time, user identification, all these things will be considered as a file attribute. Those are nothing but the basic properties that particular file will be having over there. And considering the related aspect of having, you can see for the case of specification, where user will be having the sort of capability as an Unix scheme. We can see that Unix is likely to provide the 9-bit representation, where the first bit will point for whether it is directory or whether it is a file. So you see that first bit will point for directory if it is being mentioned with D, and if it is only having a hyphen, that means it is ordinary file. Rest of 3 bits, the first 3 bit after having a hyphen and D is nothing but a bit pointed for the access mechanism for owner of that particular file, whether he is allowed to perform read, write or execute. Next 3 bit will point for the group owner related policies, and last 3 bit will point for everyone else types of user, just like whether the guest user is allowed to perform read or whether it is allowed to perform write or not. So you see, as an of having the particular sample in its directory listing, the first file is an ordinary file because the first bit itself is a hyphen, which is intro.ps, and the owner of the file is allowed to perform read write, it is not allowed to perform execute. Then group owner is allowed to perform read write, not allowed to perform execute, and everyone else is there who is allowed to perform read, not write and not execute. The second type of file that is there, it is a directory which is private by the name itself, and the first bit in that particular in its directory listing point for D means it is a directory, not a file, and as an of owner is allowed to only perform rewrite and execute. Rest of group owner and guest user is not allowed to access that particular file. So you just see the paradigm that is there as an of having the design for the case of file service interface will stick around the concept as an of file attributes, immutability, capability, access control list and file service model. So the related questions may be over there, that what type of files are there, how you differentiate between file and directory. So file and directory you can make differentiation. File is basically having a type followed with some extension, based on that you can make a note that which type of file it is, and directory is where it is do not having any extension. That is one point difference between that. And as one of the particular service model is to be considered, the model in the form of having upload download model and remote access model will be asked as a part of having question that what type of service models are there and what is their policy of implementation. So you can look for a related understanding for the case of having distributed file system related studies as one of the file service interface is being considered. Thank you.